Father Elias had always been a man of faith, serving as a priest in the small village of St. Mirabel for nearly 3 decades. His days were spent ministering to the people, offering comfort, and conducting sermons in the ancient stone chapel that stood as the heart of the community. The villagers revered him, not just for his wisdom but for his genuine kindness. Yet, even a man as devout as Elias had moments of doubt. Questions lingered in the quiet hours of the night. What truly lay beyond death? Was the afterlife he preached about as comforting as he described? Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Elias never imagined he would come face to face with those answers. It began with a fever, subtle at first but escalating quickly. Within days, he was confined to his modest bed, struggling for breath. The villagers gathered outside his home, praying for his recovery, but their prayers seemed unanswered. On a cold and misty evening, Father Elias took his last breath, the sound of the church bell echoing mournfully through the village. His passing devastated the community, but what came next was beyond comprehension. 3 days after his death, during the preparations for his burial, a scream shattered the solemn air of the chapel. It was the gravedigger's apprentice who had stumbled upon Father Elias sitting upright in his coffin, his eyes wide with terror. The village erupted into chaos. Some whispered it was a miracle, a divine act. Others feared it was a curse or a dark omen. But Father Elias wasn't the same man they had known. He was pale, his body trembling as though chilled to the bone, and his eyes held a haunted look that unsettled even the bravest among them. The villagers crowded around, bombarding him with questions, but Elias raised a trembling hand. "Silence," he said, his voice raspy and weak. "I must speak." What followed was a tale so chilling, so otherworldly, that it would forever alter the lives of those who heard it. Father Elias described his journey as beginning with a weightless sensation. He felt himself drifting away from his body, the pain and fever dissolving. At first there was light, warm and inviting. He floated toward it, feeling an indescribable peace. "It was everything I had hoped heaven to be," he recounted, "a place of serenity, where every soul seemed interconnected by love and understanding." But just as he was about to step fully into this realm of light, a shadow fell across him. A voice, deep, resonant, and sorrowful, spoke his name. "Elias," it said, drawing him back. "You are not ready." The light dimmed, and Elias felt himself plummeting, the warmth replaced by an icy, suffocating darkness. He landed in a vast, barren expanse. It was neither heaven nor hell, but something in between, a liminal space where the rules of existence were twisted and strange. The ground beneath him was ashen, the sky an eternal twilight, and the air thick with despair. Elias wasn't alone. He saw countless figures wandering aimlessly, their faces contorted with confusion and anguish. Some were whispering to themselves, others wailing in despair. "These were the lost souls," Elias explained. "Those who could not move on because of unfinished business, unresolved guilt, or unacknowledged sins." Among them, Elias recognized faces. Villagers he had known, even close friends. One man, Thomas, had been a devout churchgoer who had died years earlier in a hunting accident. "Why are you here?" Elias asked him, his voice shaking. Thomas looked at him with hollow eyes. "I thought I was ready," he said, his tone heavy with sorrow. "But my heart carried doubts, secrets I never confessed." Elias felt an overwhelming guilt. He had always preached forgiveness and redemption, but seeing these tormented souls made him question if he had done enough to guide them. His thoughts were interrupted by a chilling sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to echo from every direction. He turned and saw creatures emerging from the shadows. They were unlike anything he had ever imagined. Twisted, monstrous beings with elongated limbs and faces that shifted like liquid, as though they wore the fears of those who beheld them. They moved with unnatural grace, their eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "These were the enforcers," Elias said. "They were not demons, but something older and far more terrifying. They existed to ensure balance, to punish those who strayed too far from the light." The enforcers began dragging souls away, their cries echoing across the desolate plain. Elias tried to intervene, but his presence seemed invisible to them. "I was powerless," he admitted, "a mere spectator in a realm where no prayer could save anyone." Elias then felt a pull, a force stronger than gravity, dragging him toward a great chasm. He resisted, clawing at the ground, but it was futile. As he neared the edge, he saw what lay below, a swirling vortex of fire and shadow, where screams of torment pierced the air like knives. This, he realized, was hell, a place not of eternal punishment for sins, but of eternal reckoning for the self. Before he could fall, A hand grasped his shoulder and pulled him back. He turned to see a figure cloaked in light, its features indistinct but radiating an aura of immense power. "You do not belong here, Elias," the figure said, "but you needed to see." The figure led him away from the chasm and back toward the Twilight Plains. Along the way, it explained the truth about the afterlife. "It is not as simple as you believed," it said. "There is no single path, no universal paradise or damnation. Each soul creates its own fate, shaped by the choices they made in life and the truths they refused to face." Elias felt a surge of anger. "Why wasn't I told this before? Why is the truth hidden from us?" The figure's light dimmed as if sharing his sorrow. Humans are not ready to see the full scope of existence while they live. Faith, doubt, fear, and love, they are all part of the journey. You were brought here to understand, to guide others with this knowledge. Before Elias could ask more, the ground beneath him began to crumble. He felt himself falling again, but this time the light returned, enveloping him in warmth. He awoke in his coffin, gasping for air, his body trembling with the weight of what he had seen. As Elias finished recounting his story, the villagers stared at him in stunned silence. Some wept openly, while others looked away, unwilling to confront the truths his tale unearthed. But Elias's message was clear. Life was not merely a prelude to paradise or damnation. It was a test of one's capacity to face the truth, to seek redemption, and to embrace love despite the shadows. The once quiet village of St. Mirabel was forever changed. People began to confess their secrets, mend broken relationships, and seek forgiveness, not out of fear of punishment, but out of a newfound understanding of their own souls. The chapel, once a place of routine worship, became a sanctuary for introspection and healing. As for Father Elias, he carried the weight of his experience for the rest of his days. He never returned to the man he once was. The haunted look in his eyes never fully faded. But he used his second chance at life to guide others, offering not just sermons, but genuine compassion and wisdom. Father Elias's second chance at life wasn't as straightforward as the villagers hoped. While the people of St. Mirabel busied themselves with renewed fervor for confession and reconciliation, Elias grappled with the aftermath of his own journey. The vividness of his experience lingered, an indelible mark on his soul. It wasn't just the terrifying creatures or the vast liminal space he had seen that haunted him. It was the revelation of an afterlife so much more complex and harrowing than he had ever imagined. In the weeks following his return, Elias grew withdrawn. He often found himself staring out of the small, stained glass windows of the chapel, his gaze fixed on the horizon as though searching for something he couldn't name. Sleep became elusive, and when it came, it brought with it vivid nightmares. He would wake in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding as fragments of the Twilight Plains clawed their way back into his mind. The villagers noticed his change, but attributed it to the enormity of what he had been through. Some even romanticized his suffering, viewing it as the price of being chosen by God to witness such divine truths. Yet Elias knew better. His experience had not been a divine blessing. It had been a confrontation with the terrifying ambiguity of existence. He had been shown a world where faith alone wasn't enough, and where every soul had to wrestle with its own truths. Despite his inner turmoil, Elias resumed his duties. He gave sermons that were more impassioned than ever, though they carried a darker undertone. Life is not merely a test of obedience, he would say to his congregation. It is a mirror, reflecting back at us the truth of who we are. We cannot hide from ourselves in the end. The words resonated with some, but others found them unsettling. Elias's depiction of the afterlife, with its shadowy plains and haunting figures, was far removed from the comforting visions of heaven they had grown up with. Among the villagers was a young woman named Clara, who had always been skeptical of religion. She had attended church only out of respect for her family, but had little interest in the sermons. However, Elias's story intrigued her. Unlike the others who either revered or feared him, Clara saw in him a man who had touched something profoundly real. She began to visit the chapel after hours, not to pray, but to talk. "You've seen what's beyond," she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "And yet you're still here, still trying to guide us. Why?" Elias looked at her, his expression heavy with weariness. "Because I was sent back," he said. "Not as a reward, but as a duty. If I can help even one soul avoid the torment I witnessed, then perhaps my suffering will have meaning." Clara wasn't satisfied with his answer. But why would a just God allow such torment in the first place? Why create a system where souls can be lost, wandering in despair? Elias had no answer. He had asked himself the same questions countless times, but the figure of light he had encountered had offered no clarity, only the stark truth that each soul shaped its own destiny. "Perhaps," he said after a long pause, "it is not God who creates the torment, but we ourselves. Perhaps our choices, our fears, and our failures bind us to that place." Clara's visits became a regular occurrence, and over time, she shared her own struggles, her doubts about faith, her estrangement from her parents, and her fear of living a life devoid of purpose. Elias listened patiently, offering her not sermons but the kind of understanding that came from his own battle with uncertainty. Through their conversations, he began to see a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the face of the unknowable, connections between people could offer solace. Yet, not all villagers welcomed Elias's new perspective. There were whispers that he had been tainted by his experience, that he no longer spoke with the authority of a man of God, but with the desperation of someone trying to justify his own fears. One Sunday, an elder of the village, a stern man named Gregory, stood up during the service and challenged Elias openly. "Father, you speak of shadows and torment, of souls lost in despair. But where is the God of mercy and love in your words? Where is the promise of salvation?" Elias hesitated, the question cutting deep. He could see the unease in the faces of his congregation, the way they leaned forward waiting for his response. "The God of mercy and love is not absent," he said finally, "but neither is he a shield against the truths we refuse to face. Salvation is not a gift handed to us, it is a journey we must undertake, a reckoning with our own hearts." Gregory shook his head, his expression hardening. "You speak in riddles, Father. Perhaps you have been deceived by whatever forces pulled you back from death." The words stung, but Elias didn't respond. He knew that no argument, no matter how impassioned, could convince someone unwilling to question their own beliefs. After the service, Gregory left the chapel and others followed him, their whispers growing louder with each step. Despite the growing divide, Elias continued his mission. He began to visit the villagers in their homes, offering not just prayers but also an ear for their confessions and fears. He encouraged them to confront their own truths, no matter how painful, and to seek reconciliation with those they had wronged. For some, this was a liberating process. For others, it was deeply unsettling. One night, Elias was called to the bedside of an elderly woman named Margaret, who was on the brink of death. She had been a pillar of the community, known for her generosity and kindness, but as Elias sat beside her, she revealed a secret that had haunted her for decades. "I wasn't always kind," she confessed, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "There were things I did in my youth, cruel things, that I've never spoken of. I fear what awaits me." Elias took her hand, his voice gentle but firm. "The past cannot be undone, Margaret, but you can confront it. Acknowledge your actions. Seek forgiveness where you can, and forgive yourself. That is the only way to find peace." Margaret nodded, her breathing labored but her expression softening. She died later that night, and Elias prayed that her soul would find its way to the light. Despite these small victories, Elias's nightmares continued. One recurring dream was particularly haunting. He would find himself back in the Twilight Plains, surrounded by the wandering souls. They would reach out to him, their hands grasping, their voices pleading for salvation. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't help them. The enforcers would appear, their monstrous forms casting long shadows, and Elias would wake just as they closed in on him. The dreams began to take a toll on his health. He grew thinner, his once steady hands trembling with fatigue. Clara noticed the change and confronted him one evening. "You're killing yourself," she said bluntly. "You can't carry the weight of everyone's souls. It's too much." Elias shook his head. "I was brought back for a reason. If I don't do this, then what was the point of my return?" "But what about you?" Clara pressed. "Who's helping you carry your burden?" Elias had no answer. For all his efforts to guide others, he hadn't allowed himself the same grace. The weight of his experience, combined with the growing tension in the village, threatened to crush him. Then, one fateful night, Elias's journey took another unexpected turn. He was in the chapel, praying for strength, when he felt a familiar pull, a sensation like the one he had felt when he first crossed into the afterlife. The air grew heavy and the flickering candlelight seemed to dim. Elias closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come. When he opened them, he was no longer in the chapel. He was back in the Twilight Plains, but this time the landscape was different. The barren expanse was now dotted with faint glowing orbs, each pulsating with a soft light. Elias approached one cautiously and was startled to hear a voice emanating from it, a voice he recognized. It was Margaret. Her tone was calm, free of the fear that had gripped her in life. "Thank you," she said simply. "You helped me find my way." Elias felt a surge of relief, but his reprieve was short-lived. The enforcers appeared once more, their twisted forms stalking the plains. This time, however, they didn't come for him. Instead, they moved among the orbs, inspecting them but leaving them untouched. Elias realized that the orbs were the souls of those who had confronted their truths and were on the path to peace. The enforcers, terrifying as they were, served not just to punish but to guide, to ensure that balance was maintained. The figure of light reappeared, its presence as overwhelming as before. "You have seen much, Elias," it said, "but your journey is not over. There is still more to understand." Elias wanted to ask what more he could possibly learn, but before he could speak, he felt himself pulled back into his body. He awoke on the chapel floor, gasping for air. The candles had burned low, their wax pooling on the stone. From that night on, Elias's sermons took on a new tone. He spoke not of fear or torment, but of redemption and balance. He emphasized the importance of self-reflection, urging his congregation to seek the light within themselves. The divide in the village persisted, but those who stayed began to see him not just as a priest, but as a man who had truly faced the unknown and returned with a message of hope. As the years passed, Elias's health continued to decline, but he remained steadfast in his mission. Clara, who had grown into a trusted confidant, often took over his duties when he was too weak to stand. Under her guidance, the chapel became a place of solace for all, regardless of their beliefs. When Elias finally passed away, this time for good, it was a quiet, peaceful departure. The villagers mourned him deeply, but they took comfort in the legacy he had left behind. His story, though terrifying, had given them the courage to confront their own truths and to seek a life of purpose and connection. Elias's journey into the afterlife had not just changed him, it had transformed an entire community. And though his soul was no longer bound to the mortal world, his message endured, a testament to the enduring power of truth, redemption, and the human spirit's capacity to find light even in the darkest of places. The years that followed Father Elias's death were marked by a strange and profound transformation in the village of St. Mirabel. While the priest's body rested beneath the hallowed ground of the churchyard, his influence lingered, woven into the fabric of the community. People spoke of him in reverent tones, recounting his sermons and the haunting tale of his return from death. His words, though unsettling to many, had planted seeds of introspection and change that continued to grow. Clara, the young woman who had become Elias's closest confidant, found herself stepping into an unexpected role after his passing. The villagers began to look to her for guidance, drawn not just by her close association with the priest, but by her own thoughtful perspective. Clara had never seen herself as a spiritual leader, yet Elias's teachings and their countless late-night conversations had profoundly affected her. She took up the mantle reluctantly, feeling both the weight of his legacy and a burning sense of purpose. The chapel, once a modest building of quiet worship, began to transform under Clara's care. She opened its doors not just for religious services, but for discussions, confessions, and moments of shared humanity. She encouraged the villagers to use the space as a sanctuary for reflection and healing, free of judgment. Slowly but surely, people began to approach her, sharing their burdens and fears. Some spoke of guilt that had festered for years, while others sought answers to questions about the afterlife that Elias's story had awakened in their minds. One evening, an elderly man named Peter came to Clara, his steps slow and hesitant. Peter was known for his stoic demeanor, a man who had weathered life's hardships without complaint. Yet as he sat before Clara, his facade crumbled. "I haven't slept in months," he admitted, his voice trembling. "Elias's story, it's awakened memories I've tried to bury. I keep thinking about my brother David. We had a terrible fight before he died. I never made amends. What if he's one of those lost souls wandering in that terrible place?" Clara listened intently, her heart heavy with Peter's pain. "Elias taught us that it's never too late to seek forgiveness," she said gently. "Your brother may no longer be here, but your remorse and your desire to make things right still matter. Perhaps you can honor his memory by living a life that heals the wounds of the past." Peter nodded, tears streaming down his face. That night, he visited his brother's grave for the first time in years, kneeling in the moonlight to whisper words of apology and love. Though the act didn't erase his guilt entirely, it marked the beginning of a journey toward peace. Clara realized that the village's transformation wasn't just about the afterlife or spiritual salvation. It was about learning to live with purpose and integrity in the present. Elias's story had shaken them, but it had also given them a rare opportunity to confront their own humanity. Meanwhile, the mysterious events surrounding Elias's death and return continued to attract attention beyond the village. Rumors spread, carried by travelers and traders who passed through St. Mirabel. Some dismissed the story as folklore, while others saw it as evidence of divine intervention or a warning from the beyond. Scholars, priests, and even skeptics from neighboring towns began to visit, seeking to understand the truth of what had happened. One such visitor was Father Alaric, a priest from a distant city who had heard whispers of Elias's tale. Alaric was a man of deep faith, but also a keen intellect, known for his studies of theology and the afterlife. He arrived in St. Mirabel one crisp autumn morning, his presence immediately drawing the curiosity of the villagers. Clara greeted him cautiously, unsure of his intentions. Alaric, however, proved to be both kind and inquisitive. "I've come to learn," he told her, his voice calm and measured. "Not to judge or to impose my beliefs, but to understand what Elias experienced and how it has shaped this community." Over the course of several days, Alaric spoke with the villagers, listening to their stories and observing the changes that had taken place since Elias's return. He was particularly struck by Clara's leadership and the way she had carried forward Elias's message. "You've done something remarkable here," he told her one evening as they sat in the chapel, the soft glow of candlelight casting long shadows on the walls. "But I wonder, how do you reconcile the fear and uncertainty of Elias's vision with the hope you offer these people?" Clara considered his question carefully. Elias's story was terrifying, yes, she admitted, but it was also a gift. It forced us to confront truths we might have ignored otherwise. Fear can paralyze, but it can also awaken. What matters is what we do with it. Alaric nodded thoughtfully. "You speak with wisdom. Still, I can't help but wonder. What lies beyond even the truths Elias saw? If each soul creates its own fate, what becomes of those who transcend their fears entirely?" Clara had no answer, and the question lingered in her mind long after Alaric departed. As time went on, Clara began to notice a subtle but unsettling change in the village. While many had embraced Elias's teachings and sought to better themselves, others seemed consumed by fear. They became obsessed with the idea of avoiding the torment Elias had described, to the point of withdrawing from their neighbors and clinging to rituals as if they alone could guarantee salvation. One such individual was Agnes, a middle-aged woman who had always been devout but now seemed consumed by anxiety. She spent hours in the chapel each day reciting prayers and performing penances. "I can't bear the thought of being one of the lost," she told Clara one day, her hands trembling as she clutched a rosary. "What if I haven't done enough? What if my soul is already doomed?" Clara's heart ached for Agnes, but she also saw the danger in her behavior. "Faith isn't meant to be a prison," she said gently. "Elias didn't return to make us live in fear. He wanted us to face our truths, yes, but also to find peace in accepting who we are and striving to do better." Agnes nodded, but Clara could see that her words hadn't truly reached her. The encounter left Clara feeling uneasy. She began to wonder if Elias's story, for all its transformative power, had also unleashed a darker undercurrent in the village, a fixation on judgment and punishment that threatened to overshadow the hope he had tried to offer. It was during this time of uncertainty that Clara experienced something she had never anticipated. One night, as she sat alone in the chapel, lost in thought, she felt a sudden chill in the air. The candles flickered, their flames bending as though touched by an unseen wind. And then, without warning, she heard a voice she hadn't heard in years. "Clara!" She turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat. Standing before her was a figure cloaked in soft light, its features indistinct yet familiar. It was Elias. For a long moment, neither spoke. Clara's heart raced, a mix of fear, awe, and overwhelming emotion flooding her senses. Finally, she found her voice. "Elias, is it really you?" The figure nodded. "I've come to speak with you, Clara. There is more you need to know." Clara rose from her seat, her legs trembling. "Why now? Why not before?" Elias's expression, though hazy, seemed tinged with sorrow. "Because you've reached a crossroads. The village has changed, but not all for the better. Fear has begun to take root, and if it is not tempered, it will consume the good that has been done." Clara felt a pang of guilt. "I've tried to carry on your work, Elias, but it's so much harder than I imagined. I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are," Elias said firmly, "but you must guide them not just with words, but with your heart. Fear is a powerful force, but so is love. Remind them that the afterlife is not a place to be feared, but a reflection of the lives they lead here." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll try. But Elias, what about you? Where are you now?" For the first time, Elias hesitated. "I am still on my journey," he admitted. "I have found peace, but there is always more to learn, more to become. The afterlife is not an end, Clara. It is a continuation." Before Clara could ask more, the light surrounding Elias grew brighter, and he began to fade. "Remember," he said, his voice echoing softly, "fear may wake us, but it is love that guides us." And then he was gone. The next day, Clara stood before the villagers, her heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose. She spoke not of fear or judgment, but of love, compassion, and the importance of living authentically. "We cannot change the past," she said, her voice steady and strong, "but we can choose how we live now. Let us live with kindness, with courage, and with the knowledge that our lives are part of something greater." Her words resonated deeply, and the village began to heal once more. People turned their focus from avoiding punishment to embracing the simple yet profound act of living well. Acts of kindness became commonplace, and the community grew closer, bound not by fear, but by a shared commitment to one another. Clara continued to lead, her faith no longer rooted in dogma, but in the deep understanding that Elias's journey had given her. And though she never again saw his glowing figure, she felt his presence in the quiet moments, in the flicker of a candle's flame, or the rustle of leaves in the wind. St. Mirabel became more than a village, it became a beacon. A place where people came to confront their fears, seek forgiveness, and find peace. And as the years passed, Clara knew in her heart that Elias's story, his journey through the terrifying truths of the afterlife, had not been in vain. It had sparked a transformation not just in one man or one village, but in the countless lives that his legacy touched. As the years passed, the story of Father Elias continued to ripple through time, like the ever-widening circles formed by a single stone dropped into still water. St. Mirabel became a place of quiet pilgrimage, attracting seekers from far and wide. Each visitor came with questions shaped by their own experiences, some searching for absolution, others yearning for hope, and a few simply looking for a place where their voices could be heard without judgment. The village, once small and insular, grew into a crossroads of ideas, its modest chapel a symbol of transformation and resilience. Clara aged gracefully, her once youthful face etched with lines that spoke of wisdom and endurance. Her hair, now streaked with silver, became a mark of distinction, a testament to the countless hours she had spent guiding others. She no longer viewed herself as a reluctant leader, but as a steward of the truths that Elias had brought back from the brink of eternity. Yet even in her elder years, she often found herself reflecting on the profound mystery of his journey. Where had he truly gone? What unseen landscapes had he traversed? One crisp winter evening, Clara sat with a young artist named Lena who had traveled from a distant city. Lena, whose eyes carried the spark of restless curiosity, had come to St. Mirabel not out of faith, but out of fascination with Elias's story. "Do you ever wonder," Lena asked as they sat by the hearth, "if we're meant to know the full truth about the afterlife? Or if glimpses like Elias's are all we can handle?" Clara gazed into the fire, its golden embers casting shifting shadows across the room. "I think," she said after a moment, "that the truth Elias brought back wasn't meant to provide all the answers. It was meant to awaken us, to make us question the lives we live now. Perhaps the afterlife isn't something to be solved, like a riddle, but something to be honored, a mystery that humbles us." Lena nodded thoughtfully, sketching absent-mindedly in her notebook. "Maybe that's why his story endures. It doesn't tie things up in a neat bow. It leaves space for us to imagine, to wonder." If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a priest returning from death? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.